Hey, this is Dr. Kalinicki. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to try to provide you with a brief overview of the Math Assessment Task 4 for the edTPA for elementary educators. Some general recommendations before we start is you should try to do this in your first placement. If it doesn't go well, you can always repeat it in your second placement, so that's just some general advice. I'd also recommend for my students, and just my own thinking through what I would do if I was a student teacher, is I would complete it at the very beginning of your student teaching placement. This activity actually allows your cooperating teacher to teach the math lessons and for your focus to be on the assessment. You teach your re-engagement lesson to only a few students, and it also helps you kind of get to know some of your students and get your feet wet in the process of teaching. First thing you should do is select a class. If you teach more than one class, select your focus class for this task. You can use the entire class, but if needed or if required by your cooperating teacher, you can also use a small group, as small as about 4 students, for your entire class, but then that would also limit your 3 focus students, which you will need for this assignment. The other thing you're going to be doing is providing a context for learning, which is a template that you will be using. This document gives the reader information about your school and particularly the classroom in which you're working. There's also a component for students with special learning needs, and this is used to demonstrate your knowledge of differentiating and providing accommodations for students that you will have in your future classrooms. And then finally, the learning segment. You have to identify a learning segment, or would just be considered like a unit of instruction, anywhere between 3 to 5 lessons long. In that segment, you will give your students a formative assessment, so be sure you know the difference between a summative and formative assessment. That assessment, scoot on down here. That assessment is highly recommended. I would highly recommend you modify an assessment from your cooperating teacher or from the resources that they are using. edTPA is looking for particular insights into your students' conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and problem solving. I call that the CPP. So that's what they stand for: conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and problem solving. I recommend you not using multiple choice questions if possible, or you require your students to show work if you are going to use those types of questions. Once you create your assessment, you should also create a rubric, which they're calling the evaluation criteria. You may want to use headings on a table such as full credit, partial credit, no credit, and explain in the chart when a student would receive each. Then you're going to collect student work. I would highly recommend making multiple copies of your student's work without you grading it first. So that way you have extra copies. If you write something on a student's test and then later you say, no, I really don't like how I worded that, you can always go back. And in the meantime, use sticky notes for temporary, writing on the work. An alternative to written work, which may be helpful for students who are in younger classrooms, right? Students who are in kindergarten, first grade, or students with special learning needs. It might be beneficial for you to video record or audio record them as your evidence. Obviously, permissions may need to be granted for that based on your specific situation, so please consult with your advisor in your program or at your cooperating teacher's school. Okay, so now it's moving on to the focus students. So you have to select and submit 3 work samples for your focus students. Once you have all of your student work, you need to analyze it. You will use that rubric that you use as your evaluation criteria. You're going to use that again, except you're going to make it a table. And this time, you're going to have the results of your assessment in that table. So, for example, on question 1, 5 out of 16 received partial credit. So you'll have a fraction 5 out of 16 under the partial credit heading. 11 out of 16 received full credit, and so on and so on. You're going to be looking for 3 students in particular that have a particular area of struggle. And again, you're looking at that CPP, conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, problem solving. Hopefully you find 3 students that have some kind of similar struggle. And then we're going to move on to the re-engagement lesson. So based on what those students struggled with, you are going to evaluate, you're going to create an objective or a goal for that lesson, and you're going to redesign a re-engagement lesson. This lesson should not be more of the same type of instruction that they received the first time, possibly with your cooperating teacher. Again, consider the needs of those particular students as well as the interests of those particular students. Do they require more hands-on learning? Should you involve technology? Should you involve more mathematical discourse? Should they focus more on the vocabulary? Again, think about their specific area of need and how you can best support that. And then you have to provide them with another type of formative assessment. Again, focus on what those students struggled in. You want them to be able to show that they've grown from your re-engagement lesson. And then finally, once you've done all of that, you are then going to write a lovely description answering these prompts in your assessment commentary. So again, using that table for your analyzing student learning, but again, in a narrative format, explaining where the students had struggles and successes with regards to those three components: the conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, and math problem solving. You're then going to state that you either used written work, audio files, or video files for those three students, and again, analyze what those students struggled with, citing specific examples. In question 1, student A did this, this, and this. That demonstrated that they didn't have appropriate understanding of the concepts that we had taught, something like that. If you're using video or audio work, there's some other questions you will need to answer. Talking about the third prompt, developing students' understanding. Again, talking about the re-engagement lesson, it may be beneficial for you to actually go through a full lesson plan when thinking about the re-engagement lesson to make sure that you have all the different components of a lesson before you start, but they just ask for a description of your lesson. And then finally, your analysis of your teaching. Based on your re-engagement assessment, were students able to show some growth in the areas that you identified? And that's your fourth prompt. So I hope this video kind of helped walk you through a little bit. For the purpose of this class and a pre-student teaching class, there are going to be a few different changes to your assignment, so please look over the annotated task for document with all of my lovely blue notes on the side, as well as information on how to complete the context for learning and how to complete the learning segment, and then finally all the different parts that you're going to need to submit. And some of them will be slightly different because this is a pre-student teaching rather than student teaching itself. So I hope that video helped. Let me know if you have any questions. Feel free to reach out to me on email. Thanks so much.